There was a Catholic husband who was invited by one of his friends to go on a weekend, a Protestant friend to go on a weekend about male headship. And after the weekend he came back and he told his wife, how things were going to change in the home, that it's going to be like this and like this and like this. Anyway, he didn't see his wife for a whole week. And on the 8th day, he could just see her out of that swollen eye there. That's a Father Dennis joke. Or there's the other story of the couple who go for marriage preparation. And the priest says, the heart of the whole thing is that the two will become one. And the man says, yeah, but which one? Okay, so anyway, that's the kind of problem we have before us that I'd just like to explore. And I'm not directly going to give my opinion on it, but I'm going to lay out some various approaches to it, partly because of, as my understanding, how these little sessions are meant to work. They're not meant to necessarily be the person up front just telling people how it is, but trying to open up a question. And it seems right, let's just briefly, I'll read the key text then from Ephesians. So it's Ephesians chapter 5, which runs like this. It says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives, submit yourself to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with the water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated his own body, but they feed and care for their own body just as Christ does for the church. For we are members of his body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife. Well, these days, you never know. And the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I am talking about Christ and the church. However, each one of you also must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. Now, one approach to understanding this seems to be, at least in outline, laid before us in the Theology of the Body. Well, when I say an outline, it's because John Paul II only very lightly touches upon it, and then some of his interpreters take that and sort of run with it. I'm not saying they run in the wrong direction, but it's not really worked out in much detail in the Theology of the Body. But I just included the one text there from the Theology of the Body where this is brought into focus. John Paul II says, although the spouses should be subject to one another in fear of Christ, this point has already been highlighted in the first verse of Ephesians 5. Nevertheless, in what follows, the husband is above all the one who loves, and the wife, by contrast, is the one who is loved. One might even venture the idea that the wife's submission to the husband, understood in the context of the whole of Ephesians, means above all the experiencing of love. Now, one way to understand what John Paul II is saying there would be something like this. If you look at verse 21 of Ephesians 5, it says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. So there's the submit to one another motive. And one might interpret that to mean there is a kind of mutual submission which is required. And then in order to work out, okay, how does that work? Is it just a kind of completely symmetrical submission or somehow a non-symmetrical submission? It seems that John Paul II might be saying something like this. The male mode, or the husband mode of submission, is to obey his mission to love his wife, whereas the feminine mode of submission is to obey by allowing herself to be loved.